name is Melinda Beezer, and this is Family Incest Part 3. For those of you who haven't seen the first two videos that I have out on YouTube, a little bit of my background is I am the daughter of a pedophile, pedophile being my father. I was raised by a pedophile, so to speak. I was molested by my father. In Family Incest Part 2, we discuss my first memory of my father molesting me. My father didn't just get me, though. He also abused my sister when she was very young. He abused my brother when he was very young. I was actually the one that he started molesting who was older. He didn't start molesting me until I was 12. Both my brother and sister were molested below the age of 6, so neither one of them really remembers much of the abuse. In this particular video, since we discussed the first time I was molested in the previous video, I thought that I would start this video with a discussion about what happens after a child is sexually molested. What are some of the things that go on with that child? What did I experience in the months that follow? As discussed in the first video, or in the second video, I chose to remain with my father even after he molested me. I didn't tell my mother. I kept it a secret. I pretended that everything was all right, and I pretty much withdrew into myself. And I spent more and more time alone. My favorite place to go was the old barn up the road. I spent hours upon hours just sitting up in the hayloft of our old barn by myself, alone, because I felt safe there. It was somewhere my father wasn't going to go. I spent as little time as possible with my father. I was uneasy. I was constantly on edge, fearful. I was scared to death that he was going to do it again. I kept as much space as possible between us. The things that I had always done with my dad, I stopped doing. I mean, from a young girl when I was a child, I mean, I always wrestled with my dad, I always played with my dad, and now I was scared of my dad. And it was a very terrible blow for me, because I idolized my father. I loved my dad more than anything. And to have him do what he did to me shattered something very deep inside me. Thoughts of suicide were ever present. I thought about committing suicide. I wrote suicide notes. I plotted how I was going to do it. I plotted where I was going to do it. I literally lived on the ragged edge. I tried to keep myself safe. I spent a lot of time up with my grandparents, as little time as possible with my father. And for the few months that I lived with my dad after he molested me, I was constantly on the ragged edge. I wanted to run away. I wanted to kill myself. I didn't want to live. I just wanted it all to go away. And then this continued for a while, with me falling further and further into depression. And finally one day, I was on the phone with my brother, and he was just a little guy back then, and I remember him telling me he loved and missed me. And that statement, that one simple statement of somebody telling me that they loved me, snapped me out of, well, it snapped everything. And I broke. And I started crying. And I asked to speak to my mom. And I told my mom everything. And to this day, I remember what she said back. Oh, I was afraid that was going to happen. Okay. What do you mean? She was afraid this was going to happen? She had warning signs? Gee, thanks for leaving me here. So anyway, well, that was my mother. So, she did come down that day and get me. She packed up my room. She moved me up to Pullman where she was living. And initially, she did take my part. She got me in with the counselor. She called the detectives. They came and they interviewed me. But I didn't want my dad to go to jail. I loved my dad. I didn't want to press charges. So, no charges were pressed as a result of this. From there, the sex abuse was drug into my parents' knockdown, dirty divorce. And let me tell you, if you've ever seen a dirty divorce on a soap opera like Dallas, they've got nothing on my parents' divorce. Talk about being knocked down dirty. Now, my mom generally is a fair person. She's generally very honest. I mean, that's the way she sees herself. But in this divorce, all bets were off. I remember that my mom would make me read the divorce papers or the papers that were being served on her by my dad's attorney so that I could see the dirty things that he was doing to her. On the other end of the spectrum, while I was living with my dad had given me a good lesson in lying. Whenever I saw my mother or went to visit my mom while I was living with him, I was told what to say, what not to say. That was my first experience with lying, with learning to be whatever they required you to be. And my parents' divorce, as I said, was just knocked down, dirty divorce. And the child sex abuse was actually drug into the divorce. My mom used pretty much any weapon she could. Apparent weapon to get what she wanted, and what she wanted was my dad's farm stock. She didn't get it. And to this day, I'm not sure why she was going after it to begin with. Really, it had no cash value out on the open market, and the farm passes to me and my siblings, so I don't know what she was doing. But anyway, we're getting off base. So it was drug into divorce. And my counselor testified in court about what I had told her about the abuse. My dad's lawyer did everything he could to derail her. And in the end, my mom ended up with a court order attached to the divorce that stated Dad was not to have contact with any of his children without adult supervision. My mom had the order. It was there. She should have enforced it. She didn't. Now, my sister was no problem because my sister didn't want anything to do with my dad. She never went down to the ranch. She stayed with Mom. I wasn't going down there because of what had happened to me, so that left my brother. And my brother started going down to the ranch with my dad on visitations by himself. And it was at this point that my dad began molesting and doing things to Daniel. Now, Daniel doesn't remember much. It's vague. He was so young at that time that, fortunately or unfortunately, as it may be, he remembers next to nothing. My brother, like my sister, we believe was anally penetrated by my dad's finger. We believe that he was anally penetrated on a number of occasions. It's fortunate that my brother remembers next to nothing. It's unfortunate that it could have been prevented had my mom upheld the order and kept Dad from having contact with us without adult supervision. But my mom didn't enforce it with any of us. And my dad, after the divorce was all said and done, I got a nice dose of the fact that no one believed me. After the divorce was shut down and Mom couldn't use it against my dad anymore, she stopped believing in me. Not one person in my family believed me. They all thought I was lying. They all thought I was screwed up in the head, that I was making the whole thing up. No one believed my dad capable of molesting me. No one saw it. And as a result of that, Daniel went down to the ranch. And he fell prey. And Daniel was a quiet kid. He never told Mom. He never said anything to Mom about what was going on down there. And so it continued. No one believed me. And eventually, I did get to go down and visit the ranch on one occasion after my parents' divorce, in which I stayed with my grandparents. And at the end of my vacation with my grandparents, they sat me down and flat out told me that they would not stand between me and my dad. If I wanted to visit the farm, I would be staying with my dad. They would not take my part. And so, long story short, either I stayed with my dad and put myself at risk, or I didn't go to visit the farm anymore. And for a long time, I didn't go visit the farm. And it ate at me, because I loved the farm. I loved my animals, everything. I lost it all. My sheep, my dad sold them off. My dog that I had was run over before I ever got to see her again. I lost everything. And eventually, being away from the farm, not being able to see my home, or in being punished, the fact that no one believed in me, depression just continued to eat away at me. It was constantly with me. I grew more and more depressed. And eventually, when I was a sophomore in high school, I took an overdose of pills at school and had to be rushed to Sacred Heart emergency room to have my stomach pumped. I didn't want to live anymore. And let me tell you, I put up a fight when they tried to put that tube down your throat. Just a little word of warning to anybody out there: don't take pills. They put tubes down your throat. Trust me, you don't want that. Having your stomach pumped is not fun. Having a bunch of people hold you down while they ram a tube down your throat is not fun. Trust me. On this, you don't want that. Anyway, my trying to kill myself, suicide attempt, got me the attention of a psychiatrist who convinced me to voluntarily enter myself into the children's psychiatric ward of Sacred Heart Medical Center, where I got to spend a little over a week in the psych ward. And I wasn't in there a full day before I realized, oops, this was stupid. What did I learn in there? Oh, I learned plenty. I learned that victims get locked up in psych wards and the abuser runs around free. To this day, my dad has never done a single day in jail for what he did to me, or what he did to anybody, for my siblings, for anybody. He's still running loose. He's never done a single day. And I was up in the psych ward for a week, or a little over a week. And so what I learned about that was that I was on my own, that I was alone. And I learned to lie. I learned that I wanted out of that place. And so I told them, I said and did whatever they wanted me to do so I could get the frick out of there. And once I got out of there, I can guarantee you there was no way I was ever going back willingly. I got absolutely nothing out of that experience. All it really did was make me feel more isolated and more alone in the world. But it taught me one very valuable lesson. I was on my own. And no one was going to fix it. No one was going to stand up for me. And I was going to have to, if I was going to get better, if I was going to put my life back together, I was going to be doing it on my own. And that concludes part 3.